I'm Alex Howard, and welcome to Conscious Tea. My guest today is Jayson Gaddis. Hi, Jayson.
Hey.
And Jayson is a relationship expert and host of the Smart Couple podcast. And in today's interview, we're going to be exploring relationships as a spiritual path. But Jayson, one of the things that particularly kind of interested me about you and your work is that it feels like a lot of people that talk about relationships talk about them in a fairly utopian kind of way. It's like kind of paint this image that it's all wonderful and beautiful. That's not how it's been for me.
Or me.
That was my sense of how it's been for you either. So that kind of interests me. And I thought maybe just as a starting point, what got you inspired for this to be the particular area that you focused on in your work? What got you?
Yeah, it was mostly, it's pretty easy. It's because I was such a dismal failure at relationship. So because I had so many failed relationships with women, I finally, after my 7th failed relationship, said, after making the women wrong, basically, that I was dating and finding fault with them all the time, after the 7th one, I was like, well, if I'm the one common denominator in all these relationships ending, maybe I'm the problem. And that was when I was age 29, and it was a massive insight. And from that day forward, I set out to change that and to work on myself and to figure out everything I could about intimacy and relationship. Because
that's the place I think many of us take, either in relationship or not being able to get into relationship, is it's the other person. But the trouble is, it's not so easy that we can keep replacing the other person, right? But as you say, you were the common denominator.
Yeah.
But my sense is then let's say you took the bull by the horns and there was a pretty intensive focus in the area. I get the sense that you've gone pretty deep into it. What's kind of sustained your interest? Because there's often a point we get to where it's like, okay, I'm not in as much pain, therefore, I'm okay. But my sense is there's been a continuation and a deepening.
Yeah, that's right. Well, pretty much at every corner, I would get a new skill or get something about myself and learn, and then I would work through an issue, and that issue might be done, only to be followed with a new issue that arose. So it's like, back in the ring with this one again, or a new one. And so it seems to me, from my experience, the work never stops. So anytime I could maybe rest on my laurels or get comfortable thinking I know everything about relationship, I just get schooled.
Right.
And we were talking a little bit before about parenting, and certainly once I had children, it dramatically changed my marriage. And then kids, just the confronting nature of what they bring up in me, as blissful as it is, it's also really just a workshop. So that there's always a growing edge, right? And I'm really the type of person that is fascinated with that and fascinated with human behavior. It's never dull to me. So I like to keep going towards the edge of what I don't know and what I want to learn about myself.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that I remember in the first episode of the Smart Couple podcast, you were saying that you were the guy that was like, you were never going to have kids. You used to kind of almost like promote to friends, like, I'm not having kids. And it's like, here you are married with kids, and it's like
exactly.
Become like the kind of not only the kind of heart of your life, but also the heart of your kind of work life in terms of kind of what informs your teaching.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm curious as to how that's been, kind of the embracing the grittiness and the challenge and showing up to that.
Yeah. Well, it's the center of my life. So my family is really the center of it for me, and it's full of challenge, and it's also full of a tremendous amount of care and love and respect and amazing moments. You're a parent. There's just so many magical things that can happen that I'm enthralled with the whole experience.
Right.
I just want to keep going, keep learning.
Well, one of the things that you also said in the podcast, which I thought was an interesting kind of, in a sense, frame around this, you said that most marriages are a failure. And I was listening to that. I was lying in a bath last night, kind of doing my kind of research, listening to that, and I was like, man, that's a pretty bold statement. And I was going through all of the married couples that I know, and I do know some kind of conscious couples that have really worked at their relationship. But I was thinking of people that I know that are married that haven't actively worked on their relationship. They've just kind of let it kind of drift. And I went through a number of people, and I was like, the dude's got a point. Yeah. So I was curious as to kind of what what's informed that? And also perhaps to give us a place to go with it, how do you define success in a marriage? If most marriages are failure, like how would you define success?
Yeah, that's an important question. So to answer the first part, my own statistician here of all the couples I've seen over the years and friends and family members, it really seems like the divorce rate is, that's accurate, okay? Half the marriages end in divorce. But then what doesn't get talked about is of the 50% of marriages, how many are actually fulfilled?
Right.
And I really think it's a small number, like 5%.
It's almost like in workplace statistics, talk about absenteeism, but there's also presenteeism, like people that are at work but are not engaged.
Yeah.
Same thing, I guess. Married but like not happy.
It's also like starting a business. The stats around being an entrepreneur, how many businesses fail? Most businesses fail, like 80 or 90%. So you may stay in business but barely squeaking by and not fulfilled, and it's not really serving you, but you're working your ass off. So I find that a lot of marriages, it's just an ongoing, it's like a garden, is the kind of classic metaphor that if you don't attend to the garden, the weeds come in. And there's not a sort of one-size-fits-all approach to getting rid of the weeds. You can't just spray a bunch of chemicals. Even if you did that, your garden wouldn't taste as good, right? So the next year, new weeds had come in. So you've constantly got to be, even if you're spraying chemicals all the time, you got to be out there.
Right.
Facing the sort of war with the weeds, and the same is true in a marriage, and it just requires a lot of maintenance, and both parties engaged, and often there's one party that's engaged and the other person's values something else. Their work is more important than the relationship, and so it deteriorates. Yeah,
and I guess you see that in your couples work, where you've got one person that's like they're showing up, and the other person's been pressured, let's say.
Yeah, pressured, and then they end up feeling judged and criticized, and then that kind of contracts their relationship, and now there's a chasm or a rift between the couple, and that can go on for years, especially if there's kids, because then there can be a story about, we got to stay married for the kids, and so let's just be roommates and business partners and so we can get these kids to 18, and then we can go our separate ways.
Having written off some of the most rich, best years of life.
That's right. Sense. And we do that because I think we perceive that there's more disadvantages than advantages to getting divorced, say.
Right.
But if we actually look at it closely, we'll see that there's just as many disadvantages as advantages to either situation. And that's kind of the harmony of the universe. It's like, it's pros and cons.
And in a sense, central to what you're saying is the showing up. Like the being, rather than seeing it as something that you make a commitment and then you just leave it, that there's an investment. And so let's just come a bit more to the part two. So how would you define a successful marriage? Like what are the qualities you would see?
Yeah, I think a successful marriage is where two people are working on it actively. And that requires both people to have an orientation around growth and development. And if both parties are in growth and development, success can look like divorce. Success can look like a separation. Success can look like an open relationship for one of them. A success can look like a number of things. But both parties growing and developing and looking in the mirror at their own stuff and seeing where they have shortcomings, owning that, working on it, getting that there's an impact on their partner of their behavior, that orientation is, to me, successful.
Yes.
Whether the relationship stays or goes.
And it's interesting because I think often we have our own, as you say, there are different ideas of what it may look like, but it's the commitment and it's the showing up.
Yeah.
You said to me earlier as well, which I thought was interesting, that you get excited talking about conflict.
Yeah.
And I was just reflecting as you mentioned it, that you were saying firstly, you say more about this in a moment, that some people will tend towards being quiet and kind of they're resolving in their kind of mindfulness and not bringing it to the relationship. Uh-huh. But I was also thinking that often what can happen is if we've grown up in an environment with a lot of conflict, we can make a commitment, we're not going to be like that.
That's right.
So we just end up being nice all of the time, but not really dealing with what's there.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yeah, so the conflict gets sort of becomes the bastard child of a relationship, and it's sort of thwarted, like we don't want that, because that's bad, and anything I went through in my childhood that was hurtful, I'm going to want to avoid as an adult. So I will, and it could be confrontation, it could be aggression, it could be a mean voice, it could be a physical violence. We're going to do our best to not repeat that, right? But what we end up doing then is having an overly supportive marriage or relationship, and that's a fantasy. To think that you can be in a long-term relationship without challenge is a fantasy. So why I light up around conflict is because it gets us in the present moment to deal with what's actually there in front of us. And it snaps us out of the trance of a fantasy that we think we can have, which is childish and it's not realistic if we want to go the distance. Whether it's a business partnership or a long-term relationship, we're not going to make it unless we embrace conflict and learn how to deal with it.
But of course, doing that takes a lot of skill.
That's right.
And it takes a lot of willingness to deal with the grittiness and the stickiness, and to not just try and appease or not just try and say the right thing, but to actually say what feels like it needs to be said, which can also be super challenging. So I don't
challenging, and we can learn it. It's a skill anyone can learn. We all learned manners growing up. We all learned to be socially polite, and those were all skills that were not necessarily innate for some of us, and we had to learn them, right? To get along in the playground or to get along in the workplace. So similarly, it's a new skill it's a weak muscle. We just need to work it out and learn how to do it.
And I guess for some people, it's kind of toning down their need to kind of dominate and and for others, it's actually ramping up and actually showing up and saying what they need to say.
That's right. A lot of us are conflict avoiders, and so we'll do a lot of conflict with ourselves. We're self-blamers, is what I call them. Rather than I'm blaming you, I'm going to blame me about why our relationship isn't working. And that can only take us so far. Mm-hmm. So that also is an area of conflict that if I'm into growth and development, will be willing to work on, because it's impacting you, right? You don't want to be around me all day long if I'm just beating up on myself. That's not attractive.
Right, sure. So what helps us to start to deal with conflict in a more mature way? Like what would be some of the kind of tools or strategies that would help that?
The first thing we have to do is have the proper mindset or view, like any map. If we get the map, which the map is relationship is a path, it's a growth tool. A relationship is about growth. If we think relationship's about comfort and security, we're in for it. We're going to get shown that it's that sometimes, but it's the other thing sometimes.
Right.
It's peace and it's war.
And then when it goes to war, we feel like we failed or done something wrong.
That's right. Yeah. We blame each other or blame myself, or So the first thing is the mindset and the view. You got to have that in place, and because that's something when you get freaked out with your emotions and you're in the back part of your brain, as soon as possible you can remember, it's okay. This isn't personal. This challenge is coming my way so that I can grow through an issue of mine and become more adaptable, more resilient, and more loving toward my partner. And then the view also that we've attracted into our life a partner that represents essentially our disowned parts. So my wife will manifest behaviors that are disowned in me. Why? So that I can own them and move towards wholeness in myself. Same with my children, right? They will act out parts of me that I'm like in denial about, or have resistance toward, or hate, and they will act them out. And if I'm not privy to this view, I will push them away. Right. Just like I'll push you away if you're my partner.
Just like you're pushing away those parts inside of yourself. That's
right. That's what I'm doing, right? I'm saying, no, I'd rather be a fragmented person. Thank you very much.
Okay.
God damn it.
I'm going to maintain my view of the world, right?
Yeah. So the view is critical. And once we kind of relax into the view and we start to get that that's actually what's going on here, is that here I've attracted in some amazing person that's trying to help me unconsciously be who I am.
Yes.
That's a real blessing, and I don't have to see them as the enemy anymore.
But that takes quite a lot of gentleness, kindness to ourselves, I guess, to be able to, towards ourselves or the other person.
That's right.
To be able to see that. Because, often when we've rejected and pushed away those parts of ourselves for a long time, it's because those parts are painful to deal with and being, at least initially painful to deal with.
Yeah.
So I guess there's a certain cultivating of softness in a sense.
Yeah, and that can be hard to do when our porcupine quills are up and we're the gloves are on and we want to hurt the other person with our words or our energy or whatever else. That's challenging to do. Yeah. And again, it's a skill that can be learned over time. I mean, one of the greatest skills that can be learned in a long-term relationship in terms of a tool is just meditation, right? I was just talking to Diane Hamilton the other day, and we were riffing off this notion of why meditation is so crucial in a marriage, for example. Because it allows us to sit with our experience and not act out from our experience. We get emotional. Things get really supercharged. And if I don't have a way to just sit with it, I'm going to probably act out.
Yes.
By saying something mean, doing something mean. thinking mean thoughts and then acting irresponsibly somewhere in my life. It's just, we get emotional and we're not very trustworthy then.
Right, and it's very hard to be intimate and close with another person if we're distant from ourselves. It's
That's right.
I certainly find in my relationship that to really be in contact with my wife or kids, it's like I have to have a certain amount of contact with myself.
Yep.
And if I come home from work and I'm like completely wired and overstimulated and I try and make contact from that place, it's like often it's a mess. Like I'm reactive, I'm not sensitive, I'm not soft, I'm kind of bulldozing.
Yeah.
And it's like I have to find the way to drop first.
Yeah, and they're actually helping you. They're provoking
trying
you
to,
into the spot, right, of helping you sit with those parts of yourself and, like you're saying, get to know and be kind to those parts of myself that are now flaring up.
Yeah.
So they're pointing you in the exact place that needs attention.
Right.
And
makes sense.
if we don't have the view, then we're going to see it as a problem and as a threat, and we're going to want the other person to go away. And usually that's what happens is I get you to go away and I calm down.
Yes.
But the issue doesn't go anywhere,
right.
as I learned after many failed relationships.
Right, sure. And also for the one that's being pushed away, they're left with the feeling of effectively being rejected and not being welcome in our intimate world.
That's right, and we stay fused to the story that they're wrong and I'm somehow vilified or justified over here with my position.
Yes. Yeah. So the first thing was mindset. The second thing was kind of recognizing that, in a sense, people are acting out the parts of us that we're disowning.
Yeah.
When we see that, how do we then work with that? How do we move forwards from there?
So one thing I mentioned is the mindfulness, right?
Just
being able to sit with ourselves so we don't have to act out. And then the next thing is we need to learn that most of the source of conflict is simply a clash of how we operate in terms of our values. I'm not understanding you and you're not understanding me, and about what I care about. Mm-hmm. And I'm going to defend what I care about and you're going to defend what you care about. But if I have the ability to, again, know that that's what's going on, then I can start to, I had a mentor say to me once, it's the most resourced person's responsibility in any fight or any conflict's job to take responsibility for what just happened and to do their best to calm themselves down and calm the other person down. And I thought that was really wise because someone has to get their shit together, right? Someone has to kind of reel it in and say, time out here, what's going on? And so one of the first things we can do is see that, I'm attached or identified with my position over here because of my value structure. And you're threatening that right now. And so one of the things I can do is to see that, take responsibility for it, and then start to understand your position and what you care about and why it's so hard for you and what's being challenged here. And if I know you, if I'm married to you, I already know your values, so it's not going to be a mystery.
Right.
This challenged you because you really care about working out and I don't, and you wanted to get your workout in and I'm asking you to take care of the kids, and now you're pissed at me and resentful toward the kids because I'm asking you to do something that challenges your values.
Right.
Oh, that makes sense, honey. Got it. So let me see if I can communicate in such a way that has you feel supported around your values instead of challenged.
Which is very, very different to you don't give me what I need. You're not, it's like I'm always in service of, which is, I guess, is the other way of handling it, which then makes people even less willing to meet the needs.
Yeah, I mean, there's a great book that you may have read, just How to Win Friends and Influence People.
Right, yeah, Dale Carnegie.
It's just there's a basic principle in there, which is understand the other person and their needs and wants. And that's like the key to having great relationships. And we forget that in a marriage. We can get a little cold and a little stale and we can put our partner in a box and think we know them and have them figured out, and we don't really.
Yes.
I like to think that my wife is an ever unfolding mystery, and she throws me for a loop all the time. And some are predictable, yes, and some aren't. I'm like, whoa, where did that come from? And then I go back in and I'm just committed to understanding her, and I'll stay up all night to see if I can get it.
But you see, that what you just said there is really interesting. You'd stay up all night to figure it out and kind of show up to it. And it strikes me that what a lot of us can do in relationship is we can take it for granted. That it's like, especially people which are, myself in this, we could be very, very driven and very focused around kind of things that I'm doing. Yeah. And it can be very easy, the things which are not kind of in crisis or demanding of us, to give them attention. And sometimes the things that we care about most actually get taken for granted. And I'm curious as to is that something that's just been innate in you, or is that something that you have to work at, like bringing your attention back to it?
Yeah, I mean, let's say I'm challenged, you and I are in a relationship, and I'm challenged by some of your behaviors, and I'm feeling now so challenged that I'm not actually motivated. It's kind of what you're saying, right?
Right, yeah.
And I just lose steam, and I'm just like, man, this is too rough for me.
Yeah, that or just being complacent, like just not taking care of relationship, yeah.
So I like to think that we're committed to what we care most about. And in that moment, if it's true that I'm complacent, I actually am not valuing the relationship very high. It's on my value hierarchy, but it's probably closer to the middle or bottom if I'm in complacency. And let's say my partner's got a higher value on the relationship, which is really common, then she's going to be frustrated with me, right? Because I'm just like, well, I think we're fine. Like I kind of am okay coasting along because that's what I've done my whole life, right? That's maybe my style. If both people are in that, that's definitely a dead marriage, but it works because both people value it at the same degree, and so there's no one needs anything to be different there, right?
But it's kind only of sad, right?
It's like a little sad, but they care about other things.
Right.
Like, why would we expect someone who doesn't care about intimacy or relationship very much if their priorities are totally different? If their priorities are work and the kids and their nonprofit or something, good for them. But they need to be honest with themselves and say, oh, right, the reason I have this kind of just mediocre, stale marriage is because that's how my values are. It's not a surprise.
And I guess sometimes what can happen is when we really step back and we go, actually, what is most important? They might go, actually, my relationship is more important than what I'm giving it the attention to, but that needs to be named. Like there needs to be a kind of making that conscious.
That's right, but I would argue that it's not. It's not as important, even though they're saying that. Right. It's until the actions demonstrate it, it's not.
Interesting.
Right? So with our values, that's just the way it is. I mean, if you and I want to train for a marathon and I say, it's really important to me, I really want to train, and you're out there every morning at 5 and I'm supposed to meet you, and I keep not showing up, it's not, I'm demonstrating to you that and to myself that it's not that important to me.
Yeah.
So we have to start to link our value structure and our priorities with the thing we care most about in our life, whether it's our kids, our money, our mission, whatever it is. We have to link it with what, like the relationship. So if I want relationship to be more important, I need to see how it serves my mission in life and how it serves the greater thing that I'm called to do with my life. And it probably isn't relationship, it's probably something else.
Right. We've got a couple of minutes left. I'm curious as to, are there particular, and some of it I think you probably already referenced, but particular daily practices that you use either for yourself with your relationship or you and your wife use together, or even you guys use with the kids? Like, there are particular rituals or routines or things that are just like a must each day which help take care of the system, the structure?
Yeah, I think my wife and I do this without it being, it's kind of ritualized to the point where we don't have to name that it's a ritual anymore. But it's a basic daily check-in, and it's a check-in about how are you? What's alive for you? What's dead for you? What's cooking over there? Hey, what's up? And, we obviously cover the kids. That's, just a no-brainer with parents.
But going beyond that it often people doesn't happen, right?
Yeah, they talk about the kids and then they're done.
Right.
So it is important to us to talk about each other and have space. And we call it like drop-in time, where we can drop into our connection. And that has to be a weekly ritual at least for us, ideally a couple times a week. And
do you formalize like where you do it, or you just make time as shows up?
We have. So sometimes it's the bedroom, sometimes it's the living room, sometimes it's a date night where we're connecting in that way at a restaurant or over a glass of wine or coffee in the morning or something. Sometimes it's a nature hike. So that's a regular part of our experience. I also think it's important for people to be checking in daily with themselves. It's back to the sort of self-knowledge piece you were talking about earlier of I have to know myself, and that's going to help me in my relationship and help me get what I want and help me feel a sense of camaraderie, mutual respect, and connection. So daily meditation is a good one, daily journaling, and just so I can reflect back on what I care about and who I am and how am I showing up to my family. And one of the great questions I love to offer to people that I learned from a mentor one time is to ask myself every day, what am I bringing to the table to my partner that has her feel interested and inspired in who I am?
Nice.
So that I have to ask myself that, because so many people get lazy, like you're saying.
Right.
They're not asking themselves, and instead of what am I offering, it's what am I getting?
Right.
Like, hey, I'm not getting love, I'm not getting affection. it's like, well, if I want affection, then I better be willing to give it, you know?
Right. That's a beautiful endpoint. If people want to find out more about your work, there's a Smart Couple podcast they can find on iTunes.
Yep.
Also, do you want to give your website and any
Sure.
kind of start points to people?
Yeah, the website's probably the easiest thing, jasongaddis.com. It's Jayson with a Y.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and there's a free download you can get there of just what I call the marriage success map, meaning if you want to be fulfilled in any interpersonal relationship, there's actually a couple of key things that you can do to really change the game and help you get what you want.
Awesome. There's a lot more we could say here. I hope we will get time to another interview at some point, because
I'm
I'd love to get into the whole kids thing as well.
Yeah,
but
totally.
I really appreciate your time. So thank you, Jayson.
Yeah, thanks, Alex.
Thank you. And thank you for watching. And we look forward to talking to you again here on Conscious Tea, hopefully very soon. Bye-bye for now.